Because when someone teaches you, that person is taking and distilling a lifetime of knowledge, much of it extremely hard won, and giving it to you either for free or a ridiculously low price compared to what they paid to acquire the information. I think it's a beautiful thing. So I thought, wow, that was great. That's really going to get people to understand this. And then I realized there's a broader principle at work, which is always the way to get someone to understand something new and unfamiliar is by reference to something existing and familiar.
I've never had a time in my professional life where Americans have been more concerned about their own self-protection.
Okay, so we're going to get to part 3 of my talk with Barry Eisler. And listen, he's the novelist that I've been wanting to introduce to you guys because I always try to find, as I did with movies and I've done with television shows, I'm going to try to point you in directions that are a little bit different. You may not have seen these angles before, but they're entertaining ways to learn, valuable principles when it comes to the tool of violence from some thoughtful people. And Barry is definitely up there. His background alone, is interesting in and of itself, but the way he chose to create characters and, use the different aspects of their personalities and how they interact with violence and how they deal with it is very interesting and very useful. So again, highly recommend it. This conversation is where we end up. We start talking about, when you put the information together, how you look at it, and then also, how he creates all of these characters and what the thought process is behind it. The idea that, I love the fact that he says he wants his novels to taste good, but to also be nutritious. And from a violence standpoint, they're absolutely nutritious. So, without further ado, part 3, my final segment, Barry Eisler. When I go through your books and the way you look at violence, you weave all that in. And the other thing that you weave in was really nice is the aftermath. Yeah. That these characters, Mark and I talked about that. I had an uncle who, fortunately, he told me, hey, after you get in a fight, you're probably going to be really your body's going to shake, your body's going to come down, you can have this, you might throw up. It's all normal. I mean, my uncle was he's a brawler, and he knew, but he told us, early on, had I not known that, the first time, and I remember the first time it happened because it's the first time you've really experienced it. And that's a very natural reaction, which again, over time, you come to expect, and you still get a little bit of that, but you go, but it's all the things that we don't talk about. We love to talk about what we're doing to somebody. We want to talk about, okay, what effects is it causing the human body? I mean, you're very good at explaining that and the ramifications. I would say, and there are other novelists that I read, and they're fun to read.
Sure.
But it's it's like fantasy stuff.
Yeah, there's a place for that, for sure.
You tell great stories and you have great action in your stuff. But what's really interesting, there's always that, come to Jesus moment where it's hey, there's ramifications to this. And, these are complicated characters. These are real people, your background. And you bring in lots of conflicts. You bring in gay characters, you bring in obviously, sexual trafficking and all that. You tackle all the hard issues. And you also tackle, in a very nice way, your characters don't lean either way. Really you have, there's, I don't even want to say it's a lot of action is very, straightforward, Team America the whole time, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. Sure. But you really, from your travels and everything, you bring in the idea of other cultures, how people look at things, and there's no easy answers. A lot of times the answers are tough. And that's why I try to tell people, you'll get a result using violence, but if you ignored all this other stuff prior, you're gonna feel guilty. You're gonna blame yourself for a lot.
That is a really good point. That is a really good point. I'm glad you mentioned that. That's right. Because you could have done better, and maybe in a less costly way. I mean, most people don't want to hurt someone else, and if they do, and they regret it afterwards. Again, lots of exceptions. And I know, because internet argument, some people are listening and they're like, what about this, Barry? What about that?
Oh yeah.
Not saying without exception. I'm saying in general. How about this? How many of us have been not at our best because we're stressed or we're tired or whatever, and somebody irritates us, and we speak a little more strongly with that person than we meant to, and it gets a result, maybe even the desired result. Right. How do you feel afterwards? Not good. Usually you're like, Jesus, I didn't need to talk to him like that. I could have been more patient and we would have gotten to the same place. That was really kind of a dick move on my part. And we've all had that. We try to learn from it, do better next time. It's all you can do. But that's just from speaking to someone a little too harshly.
Right.
You know, what if you actually like physically hurt or harmed someone? Take them out. Look, if you really had no choice, that's important, because afterwards you might still not feel great, but then at least intellectually you'll be able to work through it and say, what was I supposed to do? And that's fair. Look, you didn't do anything wrong. You had no choice. But as a service to yourself, do what you can to make sure that you really had no choice.
Right.
That it wouldn't have been as easy as just saying, I'm sorry, was that your space? I didn't realize. Go on your way. You know, well, why not? What does it cost you?
Hey, and thank you so much for all. This is awesome. The one question I think is interesting, though, it's kind of a positive. And it's gonna be more along the ideas of writing and everything.
Yeah.
One thing I think that's been amazing is the changes in publishing, and you kind of led the way on the idea of self-publishing, but not in the way it used to be viewed at. You got back all your titles. Yeah. You're able to rename, and I'm sensitive to this too, because I was so limited in some of my books that what I could say, and I'm finally I got the rights back to my female book, and so I'm redoing that whole thing, and then I'm going to do that. But talk a little bit about the freedom you have. I mean, it's a positive thing that's happened with the internet and with publishing and creating your own base and everything. I mean, it's got its ups and downs, but you've done a hell of a job.
Thank you for that. Like, asking me to talk about this a little, but I will find a way. So I'll just say this for anyone here who's interested in writing or publishing. This is the quick primer on what's been happening in the publishing industry in the last 10 years. It used to be that to reach a mass market of readers, you could only do that with paper books. Why? Because technology, the only book technology was paper technology. The technical term is codex. A book was made out of paper. If you want to reach 1 million people with the technology of the day, that means that 1 million of those books would need to be printed with all the downstream artifacts of a system that's built on paper technology, meaning you need warehouses, you need trucks, you need a marketing and sales team, you need thousands of points of physical distribution, meaning stores and airport kiosks and all that kind of stuff, brick and mortar stores. All that infrastructure was dedicated to getting paper books one at a time into the hands of hopefully a mass market of readers. I'm not saying there was anything wrong with it. That's just the way it worked, because the only way to do it was with paper. And the whole publishing industry was built on what turns out to be a kind of artifact, a technological artifact of the day, paper. There was no way for a writer like me to reach a mass market of reader except through the intermediary, the middleman of a publisher. I could do a lot of things a la carte. I could get a copy editor, a developmental editor, a line editor. I could get a cover design artist. All those services have always been available a la carte. So I could just pay someone something, $500, whatever, to do one of those jobs for me. But the one thing I could not pay anybody to do, except for a publisher, was to distribute my paper books. I could even get the books printed, by the way. But then what am I going to do? Drive around the country in a station wagon, selling them one at a time? It's not practical. So physical distribution paper distribution is what the traditional publishing industry is built on. About 10 years ago, Amazon introduced the Kindle. Kindle was the first really effective ecosystem for distributing books, not with paper, but rather digitally. And what digital distribution did is it meant that writers for the first time could reach a mass market of readers without a middleman publisher. You could pay a flat percentage, which was in the case of Amazon and then Barnes & Noble and the Apple Store. These digital distribution platforms, you pay 35% of the retail price of your book. And the distribution problem is solved. So what I sometimes used to say during publishing culture wars of 5 or 7 years ago, which I was very much vocal in, a publisher offering to sell you digital distribution is like someone offering to sell you air.
Right.
And then I realized, actually, I tuned up that metaphor. There's a slightly more accurate one. It's like someone offering to sell you drinking water if you live in a place where clean water comes out of the taps. Because air is free, and actually water that comes out of your taps isn't, but it's very low priced.
Right.
And if you want to drink from your faucet, unless you're unfortunate and live someone like Flint, Michigan, yeah, you can. If you live in America, you can drink water from the faucet. It's part of essentially a flat fee. So if somebody comes to you and says, "But you can buy my fancy bottled water," you might want to. I'm not saying you shouldn't. Maybe you like the taste better, or it is infused with electrolytes or whatever it is they're telling you, but you don't need it. And that's what's critical. That's how publishing has changed. Before digital distribution, in order to reach a mass market of readers, writers like me needed a middleman publisher for that paper distribution service. There was no other way to get it. And the publishing industry is built on an aggregated model where it works like this. Hey, Barry, I know you could get a cover design person, a developmental editor, copy editor, line editor, everything. You can even have the books bound at Kinko's. You can have physical books. If you can have all these things done for a la carte pricing, not have to pay a percentage. But if you want our physical distribution, our trucks and our sales force and our relationships with Barnes and Noble and Borders and, and all the independent booksellers, then you have to get all those other services from us too, services that you could have sourced out at a flat fee. You have to buy the whole, you have to buy the whole a la carte package, or rather not a la carte, like the prefix package from us for about 85% of the cover price of a book. That's how the industry worked. Digital distribution disaggregated all that. So if I want to, I can pay $35, 35% for the distribution, and then hire a cover design person for whatever flat fee, and keep 65% of the cover price of the book, less the flat fees I paid for whatever editorial, whatever cover design, et cetera, I do. That's the biggest change. And I love it because to me, choice is empowering. 10 years ago, I didn't have a choice. If I wanted to reach a mass market of readers, that meant really a New York publisher. Now I have a lot of other ways. Just to quickly round out the picture. So at two different ends, you've got New York publishing, let's say like legacy publishing, traditional publishing on one side, self-publishing on the other. In between is Amazon publishing. This is not the same as Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP. That's a wing of Amazon. That's Amazon's self-publishing platform, KDP. There's also something called Amazon Publishing, or APUB, and that's a bit of a hybrid where in exchange for a larger percentage than you pay just for distribution alone, you can do a more traditional kind of contract with Amazon. You license them the rights to your books, and they put their marketing arm behind the effort, which in my experience can be worth a lot. So there's a lot more to this topic. That was already longer than I meant to make it. But I would just say this: if you're a writer, if you want to reach a mass market of readers, then for the first time, it's important to educate yourself, because 10 years ago, there's really no education necessary. If you want to reach a mass market, go talk to a publisher. They're the only way to accomplish it. Now you can go that route. You can go Amazon publishing, and you can go self-publishing. And because we have choices, if you want to make the smart choice, smart meaning the best choice for you, there's no one size fits all, then you should probably educate yourself a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages of these various routes. That's the state of the world now. I think it's great for writers. I think it's great for readers. It's led to more choice, lower prices. That's good for readers, which is good for society. It is not good for incumbents meaning New York publishers. So I was not the most popular guy in the world in the corridors, the hallowed corridors of the rich, culturally curating guardians of literary culture in New York. And that's okay. That's just the way it goes. We were talking a little while ago about fundamental attribution error and tribalism, and how what's really most important about those concepts is trying to recognize the way they exist in yourself, because you're human. When I look at the reactions I got in New York, they're good people. I know many of them personally. I love them. It wasn't their fault that they were so hostile. Not really. So hostile to my message. They're incumbents. There's something that's threatening the ecosystem that is comfortable for them. What do people do in a situation like that? They become hostile. It just makes sense. Yeah. It's the way it is. So no hard feelings. And I think hopefully the culture wars have died down. Hopefully I've mended fences with all the people I offended with my message before. But what's best for publishers doesn't really concern me. What's best for society concerns me. And what's best for society, I think, is more books, more widely available at lower prices. And to the extent that publishing makes that possible, I'm a fan. And to the extent that publishing inhibits it for its own purposes, I'm not a fan.
Yeah, no, it gives you the ability to really have a direct relationship with your readers.
Yes.
And it's really cool. I mean, I've really seen it. And just the way you reach out to your readers and let everybody know what's going on. It's really kind of cool. And you can kind of see what they respond to and what they don't. It's just an interesting way. And what I think is fascinating too is how the readers respond to your characters. And what they they give suggestions all the time, because I read some of the comments, and so it's hilarious. How involved people get.
Yes.
But like I said, that the reason I wanted to have you on is just your intelligent use of your platform to introduce concepts. I know it's not the main thing, but a big subset of what you teach is just really about the subject of violence and about all the ramifications about it and how to think about it and how these characters who have to use it think about it.
Thank you.
And it's a difficult subject. It's much easier just to pretend everything's like a superhero movie.
Yeah.
And I think that's very detrimental.
And I'm not saying there's no place for that. There is. But one of the things I picked up from Mark McYoung is how seriously he takes his obligation to teach effective real world self-defense, because the things he's teaching, as you know, somebody might be relying on for their life at some point. So you want to make sure that what you're teaching is sound. I'm not a self-defense instructor. I'm not qualified to be one. I know a few tricks, but and I've learned a lot from people like you, but I'm not a teacher. But still, I know that what I put in my books, especially because realism is so much a part of my brand, people might, and in some ways I think should, take it seriously as something that's real. And so I don't want to peddle in fantasies. I want to make sure that whatever information I'm providing in my stories is something that, to the extent someone learns from it, they're going to be learning something that's useful. And that's part of the reason that what I introduce in my stories, I follow up on in endnotes at the back of every one of my books. And I think this is unusual in fiction. My mind just flashed on Rocky, where he gets in the original Rocky, where the newscaster, like he's pounding the slabs of meat, and she says, "Is this something you learned from someone, Rocky?" And he goes, "No, I think I invented it." So I'm sure other fiction writers put endnotes in their books, but also I invented it. So and what I get a lot of great feedback where people say, "Wow, I didn't know about this thing I read about in your story, but then when I got to the endnotes, I realized this is a real thing." And then they can follow up with people like you or Mark or Tony Blauer or Rory or whoever, and get information directly from the source that I'm drawing on in my stories. So I think of it as kind of like, I want my books to taste great, but I also want them to be nutritious. Right. And the information I provide in the books and then in the end notes, that's the nutrition element, I hope. And the feedback I get from readers indicates that I think I'm doing an okay job with that.
Yeah. Oh no, it's first rate, man. What are you working on right now? I obviously probably can't talk about the project, but I mean, where are you going now with what's interesting you right now?
The new book is a Docs prequel, which always makes people happy, because Docs seems to be, I think Docs is probably my most beloved character, just judging from feedback. People just love him.
Just to let you know, he comes in my mind. There's a very specific tier 1 Army sniper that I know. Literally talks just like him. A lot of the same thing. And every time I'm reading Docs, I'm thinking of my friend, because that's who I relate to that. And it's really well done.
Thank you. I narrate, as you know, I narrate all the audiobooks, and I love doing it. Feedback has been great. It's ridiculous. Like I think I should be proud of the books. I mean, they take a lot of work, but the feedback that makes me happiest is people seem to love the audiobooks. I got a nice write-up in the New York Times. I've won several audiophile magazine awards for my narration. And it's almost embarrassing how happy it makes me. Like sometimes I have this joke I say to my wife and daughter, Laura and Emma. I'm like, did I mention that I'm a multiple award-winning voice talent? And they're like, oh my God.
That's great.
But I've worked hard on, and by the way, I'm going to mention something that's like, it's not really self-defense, but there's a good principle here. And whenever there's a principle involved that I think is useful to other people, I try to mention it just as I do in the stories. To the extent that I've been able to do a good job narrating the audiobooks, this is where it starts. I love audiobooks. I've been listening to audiobooks since they were called books on tape. Even before that, before there was an official thing, bootleg copies. Like I love listening to books on tape, recorded books. And so what I started off when I said, okay, I'm going to do this myself, I asked myself, what do I like as a listener? What do I like and what I don't like? Okay, I'm going to do the things I like or try to do them and avoid the things I don't like. And it's amazing. It's so commonsensical when you say it. This is a Tony Blauer thing. He calls it uncommon sense. Like I'll point something out. You know, like, for example, this is a Tony thing. He's like, well, most fights, when they start, like street fights, you know, the people aren't like, you know, like it doesn't start there. It starts with something else, an ambush or surprise or whatever. And so why don't we train that way? Instead, why do we always train from this when that doesn't happen very often in the real world? And then people are like, well, duh, Tony, that's just common sense. And he's like, if it's common sense, why has nobody else been talking about it? He calls that uncommon sense. I love that. So this is a little bit uncommon sense, but if you're trying to figure out how to be good at something that's a little bit new to you, ask how it is to be on the other end of it. I think I'm a decent public speaker, at least that's what people tell me, judging from reaction to audiences. Where do I start? What is it like when I'm in the audience? What do I like when the speaker does and doesn't do? And I just try to do those things. It's true in everything. Conversation, everything. What is it like when you're on the other end? Do that. It's probably true in self-defense too. What do you most hate? I mean, actually, this is another Tony Blauer thing. He's like, the essence of strategy, I'm paraphrasing, maybe not have it quite right, is not to do your favorite move to the other person. It's to do the thing that is like least welcome by the other person, like the thing that person most doesn't want done, not the thing you most want to do. It's a subtle distinction, but it's an important one. It applies in all these contexts. So that's where I'm coming from when I write these books. And Tim, you probably know that you're an influence too. I'm sure you've recognized Marvin Manus.
Oh, I know.
My Deaf Assassin. So
I love that.
When Manus talks about going to work, that's straight out of your course. This is what writers do. We're always like, it goes in the filter. I'm like, oh, I really like you putting it that way. And there's even one of the ways when he describes what he does to an adversary. I love this. I'm going to mention it because I think it's so important, both in your teaching and then in self-defense more generally, and also just in life generally as a principle. There's something you did in your course that I thought was so smart. And it's this: you got people to understand the self-defense technique they were executing by reference to something that they were familiar with that wasn't self-defense. So the specific example I remember is you said to the class, you're like, okay, show me, I don't know if I can get this on count. And let me see if I can point this down. You're like, show me like how you would break someone's ankle. He's on the ground and you're going to break his ankle. Show me like with a martial arts move. And people are like this kind of mincing little thing. Yep. You're like, okay, now you brought some wood in, like a dry log, pretty thick, that you need to make a fire. Now show me how you break that log in half so it's small enough to put a fire. And people are like, boom. Yep. And they're like, okay, what's the difference between a human leg you're trying to break and a log you're trying to break? And people are like, oh. And I thought that was such a smart way of getting people to perform these techniques effectively. And I, as you can tell, when did we train together? It was a long time ago.
At least
years.
8 years ago, at least 10 years.
Quite a few years. Yeah. But it really stayed with me, and I thought about it. Except, first of all, I was so impressed that I've had good teachers and not such good teachers. Good teaching always impresses me so much. I don't hold much to be sacred in this world, for better or worse, but teaching I do, because when someone teaches you, that person is taking and distilling a lifetime of knowledge, much of it extremely hard won, and giving it to you either for free or a ridiculously low price compared to what they paid to acquire the information. I think it's a beautiful thing. So I thought, wow, that was great. That's really going to get people to understand this. And then I realized there's a broader principle at work, which is always the way to get someone to understand something new and unfamiliar is by reference to something existing and familiar. This is where the cliche, it tastes like chicken, comes from. Right? People are like, well, I ate rattlesnake when I was in Arizona last week. And they're like, really? What did it taste like? Well, have you ever had barbecue chicken? Yeah, it's kind of like that. You know, it's just, we know this intuitively and we forget. And there's one other way that what you're doing in this context has wider applications that I've discovered myself. So again, this is for writers. It's a trick, really, but it's just like what the trick you were saying, like, really, that's how you break a leg? How do you break a log? No, do it that way. When my not so little girl anymore, when my daughter Emma was small and she was learning essay writing in school, luckily she had someone she had a couple professionals in the house that she could ask us, you know, what do you think of this?
No pressure there.
and what I noticed, and this is a common problem, structurally, immediately I see the structural problems in the essay. And just by good luck or good instinct, the way the approach I had with M was this. I would say, okay, look, let's not look at the paper. Forget about the paper for a minute. Just talk to me. Just tell me, why does this topic interest you? Why are you passionate about it? Why do you want to write a paper on this? Pretend you're just talking to one of your friends. And she would immediately get the structure right. She'd be like, well, it's because of this and this and this. And we got like this perfect general out to the topic sentence, you know, the reverse, the inverted triangle, to like new topic sentence in the next paragraph, supporting evidence, right on down, instinctively, beautiful structure. And I'm like, write that. And what I've learned from this, and I've had this experience with other people since then, it's weird how sometimes if we know some specialized concept exists, it's like we glom onto it too hard and it occludes what we already know. So people naturally know how to tell a story. I'm not saying everybody's a natural raconteur or whatever, but we intuitively understand like the logical structure of something we're trying to communicate. But then we're like, oh, now I'm writing the essay. You forget everything. And it's the same as in your course. It's like, break the guy's leg. And they're like, you're like, you know how to break a log?
Well, they understand, you know, you're letting them link to something that they inherently understand. And then there's two recognitions. Like with me, my whole thing is I always try to transfer some sort of a manual labor movement or some sort of a sports movement.
Yeah.
Like I show people like when they go to kick somebody like in the head or something like that, they tend to be further away when they're doing the martial arts version of it. Whereas I say, okay, if that's I put a ball down and go, show me how you kick the soccer ball.
Genius.
Run up to them. And they're right, the foot plant's right there. They get full body weight in the shot. They naturally know how to do it.
Yeah.
So now you've linked the two and you say, hey, you know, that's where the discomfort comes with a lot of people, because then they realize two things. First of all, oh, I can do this. And second of all is, oh, I can do this. Like I'm pre-wired for this. Yeah. And then, you know, getting it around there. But yeah, what you do with people when, you know, what you were talking like with your daughter and stuff was the idea of telling the story. And we somehow denigrated that. We somehow denigrated like natural movement. We somehow denigrated the ability of telling stories. Yeah. Because we put something like an essay in front of it saying, no, this is an essay that you're doing. So then you put on your, well, I have to write a essay or now I'm a writer. And so I have to think, you know, I don't tell the story anymore, you know, and it's really something that I try to do now. I try to like everything I try to write, I try to link it to something that people will relate to, that they come on, you know. It's
so weird how you have to almost come full circle. There's a saying attributed to Picasso. It was something like, I had to learn painting for my whole life before I learned to paint like a child or something like that.
Right.
And it can be a process. So yeah, when it comes to like any kind of essays, persuasive writing, that sort of thing, it's weird to me sometimes that people, they try to use all these phantom circumlocutions and shit. I'm like, just, what are you trying to say? Just say that. I have this with lawyers all the time because it's amazing how I don't know if the legal profession selects for people who are just genetically unable to write, or if it just beats that ability, the ability to write out of them and leaves them like an empty husk, just bloviating crap. So many times we'll be reviewing a contract, like a publishing contract or something, and I'll say, what does this mean? Like, what does this sentence mean? And then they explain it. And I say, why don't we just say that? Right? Like if you have to explain and interpret it, that's a bad contract. Yeah. And that's true in pretty much all things, I think.
Yeah.
Except maybe
especially when it's important stuff, you know. That's the other thing I've noticed is like, I guess that was probably from the way I was introduced to weapons and everything like that, it was always made sure that you could understand it, that you were at the understanding level, and that the language used was very clear language and very straightforward language. Nomenclature and stuff like that may be introduced later, but only if it was useful. And I try to remember that, especially when I'm teaching anatomy. I will show the anatomy, but I'll say, listen, all you need to know is this is what function you're going after here. I don't expect them to, I don't want to lose people by using the Latin terms all the time. I will refer to them to say that in the charts I have, it's all listed there. Yep. But, to be functional, to use that information, you do not have to know the specific terms. Absolutely. You just have to understand, what happens when you are successful there.
Sure. It's like if you're trying to teach someone to drive a car, you don't really need to get into the fundamentals of the internal combustion engine. You could, but you're probably not going to be a good teacher, because that's not really the point when it comes to driving a car. So I agree. You gotta know what you're doing, and to put it in terms that people will be able to appreciate and use, which is a lot of my complaint with a lot of the way many topics are taught, not just martial arts and self-defense.
Well, I really wanted to introduce my audience to you formally, because one, I love picking your brain, but two, also, a lot of them are having issues, like how they think they have to think a certain way or be a certain way because they have this media view of how you should behave, ever vigilant, EDC, you have your EDC right by you every day, all this, and that's just exhausting, and what's interesting is, listen, you got to be smart, you got to be prudent and everything. Sure. But the reason I love pointing out a source like you is it's an entertaining way to get the principles, and also got a freaking great story and cool characters and very diverse characters. But the theme is they all use violence in a different manner, and it affects them mentally different. And I tell people all the time, these are the things you want to think about before you ever have to use the tool, and prepare yourself for it. And I just think your novels are awesome for that. And
thank you. Well, they're a lot better from things I've learned from you, Tim, and people like you. So thank you very much.
Well, thanks, man. And we will put all the contact information for everything for you. But is there, in particular, is there a best way for people to get introduced to you that you would suggest?
People can go to my website, barryeisler.com, BARRYEISLER.com. That'll get you started. If you like thrillers and you like realistic violence, tradecraft, backstories, everything, I'd say that's all a critical part of my brand. So we will have all that in the show notes, and then a couple of my favorites will be in there too. So thank you so much, Tim. It was fun talking to you.
I can't. I've done
this a few times on the phone. It's about time we recorded it.
I'm hoping that I'm hoping also we can actually connect in person sometime in the near future. It'd be great to see you.
I hope so too. Well, if I'm out your way again, I will definitely darken your door. And if you happen to be in the Bay Area, Laura and I would love to see you again.
That would be fantastic, man. Well, listen, all the best. And again, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, brother. Good talking to you.
Bye-bye. Okay, that concludes my interview with Barry Eisler. Strongly recommend you go to the Amazon links that we have below. His website, his blog is fantastic. And start with the John Rain books, if nothing else. They're all great books. But John Rain is probably where you want to start and go in. And then you're going to understand all the characters that are there. And then you're probably going to want to look at Docs. You're probably going to want to look at Lydia. There's just some really, really fun characters, that you can read about and also learn about principles of violence in a very entertaining manner. So I want to thank Barry for his time. Again, thank you guys for listening. Thanks for all your feedback. And again, if you're interested in this type of topic and you want to get directly into putting together your self-protection strategy, support us. Go to timlarkin.com, give us your email. We'll give you a free masterclass that'll put you on the road to getting your own self-protection strategy for you and your loved ones. Also, please share share this channel with your friends. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. That really helps. Also, notification bells. It takes a lot of work to do these videos, and I really appreciate all the support you guys are giving me. But please let other people know. Okay, until next time, stay safe.